Well, it's quite daunting, really, hearing it. It's so well known, and yet at the same time, there's so much that's enigmatic about it. Any idea of giving an interpretation or saying what it means is almost impossible, actually. I think what we really like about Wasteland and this section is the style and the mood that is created. I think I can say a few things about it, but probably won't be startlingly original. I think that what I really enjoy is the modern technique. So there are things from the past, there are things from the present, they're, they're all meshed in together. Madame Sosostris, Stetson, the ships at Mylae, the references to Dante with the living seeming like dead men, and the poet saying he didn't think death had undone so many. Maybe the first thing to say is that it starts in an incredibly dramatic way. April is the cruelest month. It's not what we expect. April is a time of new life. And it had been celebrated by Chaucer, of course, at the beginning of the Canterbury Tales. One that April with his shower is sutta, the drought or March hath pierced to the rooter. So usually people are waiting for April showers, the creation of new life. But it's different if it's a dead land. The land is somehow mutated, and the only thing it can give birth to is abnormalities and monstrosities. Better that new life doesn't come. So this seems to be the case here. There's a reference to winter having kept the life warm, and or a little life warm, and the birth of these abnormalities, mutations, had not been possible at that time. Of course, Eliot is writing just after the First World War, and also the terrible losses that were due to Spanish flu. Millions and millions more, I think, to Spanish flu than to the war. And it provides a contemporary kind of feel when people are suffering so much right now with the COVID problem. So he creates this blasted wasteland where nothing grows, or maybe a few things can grow, but there will be abnormalities and monstrosities. So it's better that nothing procreates at all. Better that just everything remains dead. And certainly one can relate this, I think, to the trenches and the losses of life in the First World War. There are references which seem a bit strange, perhaps, to European aristocratic civilization before the war, and perhaps Eliot is suggesting that this was a more civilized time, and we know that he was a very traditionalist man in his thinking. So perhaps he's looking back to what for him was a more idyllic, admirable time, and these references to German aristocracy perhaps can be explained in that way, and also the references to Tristan and Isolde, the doomed love affair, which yet had some nobility to it, perhaps nobility which is impossible in the modern age. Yes, there's a reference to Madame Sosostris, who seems to be a kind of Madame Blavatsky figure. The idea that, well, at the time Eliot was writing, of course, Theosophy was something big, and this was a mix of kind of Eastern ideas Hindu ideas, Buddhist ideas, with contemporary ideas about seances and ghosts and things, kind of supernatural happenings in Europe. And Eliot seems interested in this. There's also the reference to the tarot pack and the tarot cards and the drowned Phoenician sailor. So it seems that Eliot is kind of bringing all kinds of disparate material together from the past into the present, and suggesting perhaps that things don't change that much. There were wars in the past, there are wars in the present. Life is a cycle. Can't escape suffering. Sometimes I think that, well, it's certainly true that at this time Eliot was very interested in Eastern religions and Eastern ideas, and there's later on the reference to the fire sermon of the Buddha. So he was interested in Buddhist ideas and Eastern ideas in general at this time. So maybe he saw the wasteland as an image for samsara, the place of conditioned existence where there can never be any true contentment, and where suffering is the true nature of reality, a cycle of endless suffering. And that would relate the past references to the ships at Mylae, which was a battle in the Carthaginian War with Rome, to the modern war. So maybe the references to Stetson seeing his friend could be like reincarnation, perhaps. People who have been reincarnated, going through the same misery many, many times. But there's the modernisms with the name Stetson. It's usually thought to be like a big cowboy hat, right? So it seems like an American name, something modern. And the reference to the fighting in the ships at Mylae. There is the enigmatic reference to the corpse in the garden, and of course Eliot is great at bringing other writers and their perspectives into his vision. And there is a reference to John Webster here as well. Oh, keep the dog far hence as friend to men, or with his nails he'll dig it up again, talking about the corpse when Stetson and his friend are talking together. So perhaps these are two figures trapped in samsara, and they're just going around in the circle of life and death without ever getting anywhere, just going through one war after another. This is why it's Deadland, because it's just a place of dukkha, a place of suffering. Of course, that's not necessary. It's just a possible. It's not necessary to see it in those terms. It's just a possible interpretation, something that might add some interesting perspective to the poem, especially knowing that Eliot was so interested in Eastern religions at this time. And then there are the references to the people flowing over London Bridge, up and down, who seem to be having a life in death. This is partly a reference to the horrible suffering of the war and also the flu epidemic, but again could be a reference to the nature of samsara. Just in the desert of samsara, there is nothing in the end except suffering. It is also a reference to Dante's Inferno, of course. So I would say that probably at this time, Eliot wasn't sure which direction he wanted to go in, but he did have an essentially religious sensibility, and eventually it settled on Christianity. But I don't think that was inevitable at this stage. It could have gone towards Eastern religions, and this may be a reference to the Buddhist Hindu idea of samsara. The title of the section is a reference to the Anglican prayer book, The Burial of the Dead, and that may also indicate that Eliot's mind was already also working in the direction of Christianity too. But anyway, something religious, all sorts of Christian and Hindu, Buddhist imagery seems to work for him at this time. So he knows that this is a wasteland, and he knows that he is searching for something that can give it meaning, or he is searching for something that can give it meaning. That becomes apparent in his later poetry. And then finally there's the reference to Baudelaire. He says that the reader is a hypocrite, but his own likeness and his brother. So the writer and the reader may be hypocrites, but they share a lot in common. So many of the themes of the poem have been introduced here: death, infertility, loss, desert landscapes, cycles of death, cycles of life and death, suffering, drought, dryness, sterility. Many of these themes will be worked out late in the later sections, or at least dealt with in more detail in the later sections. But as an opening gambit is the wrong word. As an opening section of the poem, I think it's superb. Really, it sets the scene so well and lays out all the major themes. Is brilliant in terms of its ability to juxtapose images and ideas together, bringing things from the past and the present together in a remarkable way that anyone who hears it read will still think is modern. And I don't think that all the ramifications of what Eliot did has even yet been worked out. This is still incredibly modern, and when one reads it, one sees this as something which is modern, even though it's already nearly 100 years old. So they're my initial ideas about the burial of the dead. I could probably go on all day, adding a few points here and a few points there, but I probably made major points, and I will look at the second section of the poem soon. So thank you for listening. Thank you.